A white officer stops a black woman as she walks out of an upscale store. He accuses her of stealing the designer bag in her hand. His voice is sharp and demeaning. The woman, Grace Thompson, stands frozen. She calmly tells the officer she purchased the bag and shows him the receipt. The officer smirks and dismisses her proof. "People like you do not shop in places like this," he says loudly. The crowd starts to gather. Some record the scene, others whisper among themselves. Grace's heart pounds, but she keeps her calm. As the officer grabs her arm and tells her she is under arrest, the tension escalates. She asks to call her husband, but the officer laughs. "Whoever he is, it will not change anything," he says. What happens next stuns the officer and everyone watching. Grace's husband arrives and his identity leaves the officer in complete shock. What happens when the truth is revealed will leave you speechless. Keep watching to find out. Let us know where you are watching from in the comments and subscribe to our channel for more eye-opening stories. Grace Thompson is a hard-working woman in her late 30s. She is elegant, confident, and respected in her community. Grace works as a financial consultant at a top firm and is known for her professionalism. She has always believed in honesty, integrity, and treating others with respect. At home, Grace is a loving wife to her husband David and a caring mother to their 2 children. Her life is a picture of balance and success built on years of hard work and determination. David Thompson is an accomplished lawyer known nationwide for his fight against racial discrimination. His charisma and intelligence make him a formidable figure in the courtroom and beyond. Together, Grace and David are seen as an inspiring couple who represent strength, unity, and perseverance in the face of challenges. The story takes place in a bustling urban city. The streets are lined with high-end boutiques and cafes frequented by wealthy shoppers. Grace decides to visit one of these upscale stores to purchase a designer handbag she has been saving for. She steps into the store filled with excitement and pride. The shop assistants greet her warmly, and she selects her bag after careful consideration. Grace pays for the item and leaves the store carrying her new purchase with a sense of accomplishment. Meanwhile, Officer Rick Saunders is patrolling the same area. Rick is a middle-aged white police officer with a reputation for being overly suspicious and quick to judge. He has worked in the department for years, but his interactions with minorities often raise eyebrows. Many in the community know him for his dismissive attitude toward people of color. On this particular day, Rick's prejudice and assumptions lead him to a decision that will have serious consequences. As Grace walks out of the store with her shopping bag, Rick notices her from across the street. He watches her carefully, his mind jumping to conclusions based on her appearance. He feels something is off, but instead of observing further or verifying facts, he decides to confront her. This is where the story takes a dramatic turn. Grace and Rick's worlds collide in a moment that will test both of their characters. Grace is about to face humiliation and judgment, while Rick is about to encounter a truth that will challenge everything he believes. Grace steps out of the store carrying her newly purchased designer handbag. The sun is shining and the streets are busy with shoppers and professionals. She feels proud and content as she walks toward her car parked a block away. Suddenly, Officer Rick Saunders approaches her with a stern expression on his face. "Excuse me, ma'am?" Rick says his tone is sharp. Grace stops and looks at him confused but polite. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asks. Rick glances at the shopping bag in her hand and narrows his eyes. "Yes, there is." "Can you explain where you got that bag?" he demands. Grace is taken aback. "I just bought it from the store right there," she replies, pointing to the boutique she just exited. Rick does not seem convinced. "Do you have a receipt?" he asks, his voice cold and accusatory. Grace reaches into her purse and pulls out the receipt. She hands it to Rick, expecting the situation to be resolved quickly. Rick glances at it, but his suspicion remains. "This could be fake," he mutters under his breath. Grace hears his words and feels a pang of anger rising within her, but she stays calm. "Why would I fake a receipt, officer?" she asks firmly. Rick ignores her question and radios for backup, claiming he has a potential shoplifting suspect. Grace is stunned. She cannot believe what is happening. Bystanders start to gather, pulling out their phones to record the scene. The whispers and murmurs from the crowd make the situation even more humiliating for Grace. Rick steps closer, invading her personal space. "Ma'am, I need you to come with me for questioning," he says. Grace stands her ground. "I am not going anywhere. I did nothing wrong and I have the proof right here," she says, holding up the receipt. The tension escalates as Rick reaches for her arm, attempting to detain her. Grace pulls back, her voice firm. "Do not touch me." "I have done nothing wrong," she says. The crowd grows larger and more vocal, some people shouting their support for Grace while others remain silent. Among the crowd, a young man named Peter starts recording the entire interaction on his phone. His video captures the officer's behavior and Grace's calm yet determined response. Peter's actions will later play a crucial role in this unfolding drama. Rick continues to press Grace, making baseless accusations. "You match the description of a shoplifting suspect," he says, though it is clear he has no real evidence. Grace's heart races, but she refuses to let fear take over. "I will not be intimidated. I know my rights," she says firmly. As the crowd watches the scene unfold, Grace's dignity and strength shine through. She refuses to back down despite the officer's attempts to demean her. This is not just about a handbag. It is about standing up to injustice and prejudice. Rick grows more aggressive. He takes out his notepad and writes something down while continuously accusing Grace. She tries to stay calm, but the situation is spiraling out of control. The crowd around them grows larger. People are murmuring, and the tension in the air is thick. Grace refuses to let herself be intimidated. "Officer Saunders, this is unacceptable," she says, her voice steady and clear. "I have provided proof that I purchased this bag. I will not allow you to harass me without any reason." Rick smirks at her confidence. "You can say whatever you want, but it does not change the fact that you are a suspect." He grabs her arm, trying to pull her toward his patrol car. Grace resists firmly and says loudly, "Let go of me. You are violating my rights." At that moment, a woman from the boutique Grace had just left appeared on the scene. She is holding a clipboard and looks concerned. "This lady was just in my store. I saw her purchase that bag with her card," the boutique owner says. Rick hesitates but quickly brushes off the woman's statement. We are still investigating, how he mutters while keeping his grip on Grace's arm. The boutique owner's statement fuels the crowd's murmurs. Many start to question Rick's motives openly. Peter, the young man recording, speaks up. "Officer, this does not look right. She clearly has the receipt and now you have a witness too. Why are you still holding her?" he says with courage. Rick's face hardens. He glares at Peter but does not respond. Grace looks at Peter with gratitude. She knows that his video and courage might be her only chance at justice. Suddenly, Rick calls for backup again, this time sounding frustrated. "Send a car immediately," he says into his radio. Within minutes, another police vehicle arrives. A second officer steps out, observing the scene. The second officer approaches Rick. "What is going on here?" he asks. Rick explains his version of events, but his tone is defensive. The second officer glances at Grace, then at the boutique owner and Peter. He listens carefully to their statements. It is clear that this situation is not what Rick described. The second officer looks at Rick disapprovingly. "Are you sure about this, Rick?" he asks. Rick's frustration grows. "Just do your job and help me take her in the snaps." The second officer does not act. Instead, he turns to Grace. "Ma'am, I apologize for what is happening. Please remain calm. We will sort this out," he says. Grace nods, but her patience is wearing thin. The situation reaches its peak when a luxury car pulls up nearby. The door opens and a tall, confident man steps out. He is wearing a sharp suit and his presence immediately commands attention. The crowd turns to look at him. Grace's expression softens as she recognizes her husband, Michael. Michael walks toward the scene with a calm but authoritative demeanor. He glances at Grace, then at Rick. What is going on here? He asks, his voice deep and steady. Rick does not recognize Michael and responds dismissively. Sir, please step back. This does not concern you. Michael ignores him and looks at the second officer. Is this how your department handles situations? He asks. The second officer appears uncomfortable. Sir, we are trying to resolve this, he says. Michael nods slightly, then turns to Rick. You do not even know who you are dealing with, do you? He says. Rick looks annoyed. And who are you supposed to be? He asks, sarcastically. Michael pulls out a sleek leather wallet and shows his badge. I am Michael Johnson, legal advisor to the state and your superior by chain of command, he says calmly. Rick's face turns pale. The crowd gasps as they realize who Michael is. The second officer steps back, giving Michael space. Rick stammers, I did not know, sir. I thought she was a suspect. Michael's expression hardens. You thought wrong. She is my wife, and you have humiliated her without cause. Do you realize the damage you have done? He says. The crowd begins to cheer and clap as they see justice unfolding in front of them. Grace finally feels the weight lifting off her shoulders. Michael puts his arm around her and says loudly, We will not tolerate this kind of behavior. As the situation reaches its peak, Michael looks directly at Rick. His calm demeanor contrasts sharply with Rick's growing unease. The crowd is completely silent, waiting to see what happens next. Michael speaks firmly. Officer Saunders, I want you to listen very carefully. You accused my wife without any evidence. You ignored the receipt and a witness. Now you have not only harassed her but violated her rights. This is unacceptable. Rick stammers nervously. Sir, I was just doing my job. Michael's expression hardens. Doing your job? Is your job humiliating innocent people? Is your job ignoring proof and targeting someone based on their appearance? Tell me, officer, does this look like good police work to you? The boutique owner steps forward again, emboldened by Michael's presence. Officer, I already told you she bought that bag in my store. You had no reason to accuse her. This whole thing is wrong, she says firmly. The second officer, visibly uncomfortable, addresses Michael. Sir, we had no idea who she was. We were following protocol. Michael interrupts sharply. Protocol? What protocol allows you to detain someone after they have provided evidence of their innocence? The second officer lowers his head, unable to respond. Michael continues, This is not about protocol. This is about bias. This is about abuse of power. Rick tries to defend himself. Sir, please let me explain. Michael cuts him off. You will explain everything, but not to me. You will explain this to your superiors. You will explain this to internal affairs. And you will explain this to the public, because I will ensure this incident is fully investigated. Grace watches her husband with a mix of relief and admiration. For the first time since the ordeal began, she feels safe. She places her hand on Michael's arm and says softly, Thank you. Michael turns to the crowd, his voice loud and clear. What you have seen here today is not just about one officer's actions. It is about a system that allows this kind of behavior to continue. We need to stand together and demand change. The crowd begins to cheer and applaud. People shout words of support and agreement. Some hold up their phones, recording every word Michael says. Peter, the young man who had been recording the entire incident, steps forward. Sir, I captured everything on video. I will send it to you so you can use it as evidence, he says. Michael nods appreciatively. Thank you, young man. Your courage will make a difference. As the tension eases, Grace takes a deep breath. She turns to Rick and says, You owe me an apology. Not because of who my husband is, but because I am a person who deserves respect. Rick looks down, unable to meet her eyes. I am sorry, he mutters. Michael addresses the second officer. Escort this man back to the station. Make sure this incident is reported immediately. The second officer nods and leads Rick away. As the crowd begins to disperse, many approach Grace and Michael to express their support. One woman says, "Your strength inspires me. Thank you for standing up to this." Michael places his hand on Grace's shoulder. "Let us go home," he says. Grace smiles at him, grateful for his unwavering support. This moment is not just a victory for Grace and Michael. It is a wake-up call for everyone who witnessed it. A reminder that standing up against injustice can create change. As the video of the incident goes viral, it sparks outrage across the town and beyond. Social media platforms explode with comments and shares. People are shocked by the blatant injustice Grace faced and the calm but powerful response from her husband, Michael. The hashtag, Justice for Grace, begins trending nationwide. Local news channels pick up the story. They show clips of the video taken by Peter and others at the scene. Reporters highlight the clear evidence of racial bias and the unnecessary humiliation Grace endured. Interviews with witnesses reveal how appalled they were by Officer Rick's behavior. A community meeting is organized in the town square. Hundreds of people gather holding signs with slogans like "End Racial Bias" and "Justice for All." Many of them are inspired by Michael's speech at the boutique. One speaker takes the stage. A young man says, "I have lived in this town my whole life. I have seen people like Officer Rick act with prejudice, but nothing was done. Today is different. Today we stand together and say, enough is enough." The crowd erupts in applause. Another woman comes forward. She shares her own experience of being targeted by Rick. "He accused me of stealing just because I was carrying a nice purse," she says, her voice trembling. "He humiliated me in front of my children." As more people share their stories, it becomes clear that this is not an isolated incident. Rick has a long history of targeting minorities and abusing his power. Grace and Michael watch the meeting from the front row. Grace feels a mix of emotions. She is grateful for the support, but angry that so many others have suffered like she did. A local activist group announces they will file a formal complaint against the police department demanding a full investigation into Rick's actions. They call for reforms to ensure that no one else faces discrimination and harassment. The pressure on the police department grows. The town's mayor releases a statement condemning Rick's behavior. The police chief holds a press conference announcing that Rick has been placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. During the press conference, a reporter asks the chief, "Do you believe Rick's actions reflect a larger problem within your department?" The chief hesitates before answering. "We are committed to addressing any systemic issues and ensuring our officers uphold the highest standards of conduct," he says. Michael and Grace decide to speak out publicly. They hold a press conference in their home. Grace says, "I am not just speaking for myself. I am speaking for everyone who has been treated unfairly because of the color of their skin. This is about justice." Michael adds, "This is not just about one officer. It is about changing a system that allows this kind of behavior to go unchecked. We need accountability. We need change." Their words resonate deeply with people across the country. Donations pour in to support the activist group's efforts. Legal experts offer their services pro bono to assist in the investigation. The boutique owner also speaks out. She tells reporters, "I felt helpless watching Grace being treated that way. I hope this incident will lead to real change." Meanwhile, Rick faces mounting backlash. He becomes the target of intense criticism. His colleagues distance themselves from him. Some even speak anonymously to the press, saying they have witnessed his inappropriate behavior before, but were afraid to report it. Rick releases a brief statement through his lawyer. He apologizes for his actions but claims he was simply doing his job. His words are met with skepticism and criticism. The incident sparks broader conversations about racial bias in law enforcement. Townspeople begin organizing workshops and forums to discuss solutions. Schools introduce lessons on diversity and inclusion. Grace is invited to speak at one of the forums. She tells the audience, "This is not just about my story. It is about creating a world where everyone is treated with dignity and respect. Michael receives messages from people across the country thanking him for standing up against injustice. One message reads, "You showed us what it means to be strong and to fight for what is right." The public backlash becomes a turning point for the town. It forces people to confront uncomfortable truths about prejudice and inequality. It inspires them to take action and work toward a more just society. Grace and Michael's story sparks a wave of change in their town. People begin to reevaluate their attitudes and behaviors. The police department faces public pressure to reform its policies. The mayor announces a town hall meeting to address concerns about racial bias and injustice. Grace is invited to speak at the meeting. She stands confidently in front of the crowd. Her voice is steady as she says, "I never wanted to be in this position, but what happened to me was not just about one officer. It is about a system that needs change." Michael stands beside her. His presence is reassuring. He adds, "We must ensure that our children grow up in a world where they are judged by their character and not the color of their skin." The crowd responds with applause. People share their own experiences and call for accountability. Meanwhile, Rick begins to confront the consequences of his actions. Suspended from the force and facing widespread criticism, he is forced to reflect on his behavior. For the first time, he realizes the harm he has caused. Rick decides to attend the town hall meeting. He listens to the stories of those he has wronged. He sees the pain in their eyes. It is a moment of reckoning for him. After the meeting, Rick approaches Grace and Michael. His voice is low but sincere as he says, "I am sorry for what I did. I was wrong. I need to change." Grace looks at him for a moment. She sees the regret in his eyes. She replies, "Change starts with taking responsibility. If you are serious about it, prove it through your actions." Rick takes her words to heart. He volunteers to participate in community workshops on racial sensitivity and bias. He begins to work with organizations dedicated to promoting justice and equality. At the same time, Grace and Michael decide to turn their experience into a force for good. They establish a foundation focused on education and advocacy. The foundation provides resources for people who have faced discrimination and works to foster understanding and inclusion. Grace becomes a sought-after speaker. She visits schools and community centers sharing her story and encouraging others to stand up against injustice. She tells students, "You have the power to make a difference. Speak up, stand strong, and never lose hope." Michael takes on a leadership role in the foundation. He uses his business skills to ensure its success. Together, he and Grace create programs that empower marginalized communities and promote equality. The town begins to change. The police department implements new training programs focused on diversity and de-escalation techniques. Officers are required to attend workshops on understanding bias and building trust with the community. Rick becomes an advocate for reform within the department. He speaks openly about his mistakes and the lessons he has learned. His journey inspires others to examine their own biases and take steps toward positive change. The impact of Grace and Michael's work extends beyond their town. Their foundation gains national recognition. Donations pour in, and other communities reach out for support and guidance. Grace reflects on her journey. She tells a reporter, "I never imagined my life would take this path. But if sharing my story can help even one person, it is worth it." Michael adds, "It is not about us. It is about creating a better future for everyone." Their story becomes a powerful example of how resilience and compassion can lead to transformation. It shows that even in the face of adversity, positive change is possible. Grace and Michael's efforts inspire a movement. Their town becomes a model of unity and progress. People from all walks of life come together to build a community based on respect and understanding. In the end, Grace says, "Change is not easy, but it starts with each of us. If we are willing to listen, learn, and grow, we can create a world where everyone is treated with dignity and fairness. The story of Grace and Michael serves as a powerful reminder that courage and resilience can overcome even the toughest challenges. Grace could have remained silent when Officer Rick unfairly accused her. She could have accepted humiliation to avoid further conflict. But she chose to stand tall not only for herself but for her family and community. Michael's unwavering support and calm demeanor were equally inspiring. His actions showed that unity and love can be stronger than prejudice and hate. When the couple faced injustice together, they transformed their pain into a mission for change. Rick's journey is also a lesson. It shows that no one is beyond redemption if they are willing to reflect on their mistakes and take meaningful steps toward improvement. By acknowledging his errors and working for change, Rick demonstrated that growth is possible even for those who have caused harm. As Grace and Michael continued their advocacy, they helped countless others find their voices. The foundation they built empowered communities to speak up against injustice and fostered understanding between people of different backgrounds. Their town, which once seemed divided, grew into a symbol of hope and progress. Grace's story inspired people around the world. It showed them that standing up for what is right can lead to real change, even when the odds seem stacked against you. Her words at one of her speeches resonate deeply. We all have a role to play in creating a fairer world. It starts with the small choices we make every day. Michael often reminded people that change does not happen overnight. He said, "Change is a journey. It requires patience, persistence, and a belief that tomorrow can be better." Their story did not just end with their town. Their foundation expanded its reach, providing resources and support to marginalized communities across the nation. Grace became a voice for justice and equality on a global stage, inspiring others to take action. Rick's transformation also became a part of the legacy. His decision to educate himself and work toward reform served as an example that even the most unlikely individuals can contribute to a better society. His openness about his past mistakes and his willingness to share his story encouraged others to confront their own biases and work toward inclusivity. The legacy of Grace, Michael, and even Rick proves that while injustice and prejudice may exist, they do not have to define our lives or our communities. They showed that through courage, understanding, and collective effort, a better future is possible. The story ends with a message of hope. Grace says change begins with one step, one voice. When we choose to stand up against hate, we create ripples that can transform the world. What would you do if faced with such injustice? Would you stand up like Grace and Michael did? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story inspired you, make sure to share and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories of courage and change.